In late August of 2013, the highways stretching through central and southern California held the familiar stillness of the end of summer, that strange seasonal pause when campuses begin to refill, families settle back into routine, and long roads seem to carry people not just between places, but between versions of themselves. On those roads, under a wide and indifferent sky, a 19-year-old college student named Bryce Laspisa began a journey home that should have taken only a matter of hours. He had made the drive before. The route from Northern California down toward his parents' home in Laguna Niguel was neither remote nor extraordinary. It passed through service stations, open highway, truck stops, fields gone gold in the heat, and the steady current of traffic flowing south. There was nothing about it that suggested mystery, nothing about it that hinted that somewhere along that route, between intention and arrival, Bryce Laspisa would vanish so completely that more than a decade later, his name would remain attached not to an answer, but to a question. To understand why his disappearance has lingered with such unusual force, it helps to begin not with the final hours, but with the life that seemed to precede them. Bryce was, by most accounts, intelligent, personable, and creative. He studied at Sierra College near Sacramento. He was young in the particular way only 19-year-olds can be, inhabiting that unstable border between adolescence and adulthood, where every emotion feels immediate and every decision has the power to change a future that has not yet fully taken shape. Friends and family saw in him both promise and complexity. He was said to be artistic, thoughtful, and at times inward, someone still becoming himself. Nothing in that description is remarkable on its own. It becomes remarkable only in hindsight, because disappearances often force ordinary traits to become evidence in ordinary moments to bear the weight of prophecy. By August of that year, certain details in Bryce's life appear to have shifted. The summer was ending, college was resuming, relationships were under strain. His girlfriend later described behavior that seemed increasingly unusual and emotionally unsettled. There were reports that he had been drinking heavily, and there was discussion of possible drug use, particularly Vyvanse, a prescription stimulant. What exactly this meant in practical terms remains difficult to fix with certainty. The available pieces suggest a young man under pressure, possibly sleep-deprived, possibly chemically altered, possibly reaching some internal breaking point that others could sense without fully understanding. Around this time, he gave away personal belongings to friends, an act that, taken in isolation, might mean very little, but in the shadow of what followed, has been revisited again and again. He also reportedly ended his relationship with his girlfriend in a manner that struck her as abrupt and unsettling. His mother would later say that when she learned some of this after the fact, she believed her son had been experiencing some sort of emotional crisis. The difficulty, then as now, is that a crisis is not a map. It tells you that something is wrong. It does not tell you where a person will go. On August 28th, Bryce left his apartment in Rocklin, California, and began the drive south. At some point during that trip, his mother, Karen Laspisa, became concerned enough to keep calling him. He told his mother he was coming home. That much seems clear. He was on his way to Laguna Niguel, where his parents lived. Yet as the hours passed, his progress began to make less and less sense. He was not simply delayed in the ordinary way people are delayed by traffic or fatigue. He was slowing, stopping, drifting into a pattern that suggested either confusion or something more deliberate. One of the clearest windows into those strange hours came through a roadside assistance interaction near the town of Buttonwillow, a place known mostly as a stop along Interstate 5, where travelers refuel, eat, and continue on. Sometime during the night, Bryce apparently ran out of gas or otherwise required assistance, and a service technician named Christian was sent to help him. When Christian arrived, he found Bryce sitting in his car, and what he encountered was not a frantic or visibly panicked young man, but someone who appeared calm, almost unnervingly so.
Bryce had enough money, he accepted help, he seemed coherent enough to interact, yet there was also something off about the entire situation, because by that point, Bryce had already spent an unusually long period in the same general area instead of continuing toward home. When Christian later spoke about the encounter, what stood out was not overt distress, but a kind of stillness, an emptiness that in retrospect feels unsettling. Bryce had allegedly been in that area for hours, yet when approached, he did not offer a compelling explanation.
His mother, desperate to make sure he kept moving, remained in contact with him through the night. The family, realizing that something was wrong, but still believing the problem could be managed from a distance, even arranged for Christian to check on Bryce more than once. It is one of the most haunting features of the case, the sense that he was never fully out of reach, until suddenly he was. There were moments when a stranger looked directly at him, when his voice was on the phone, when his car was visible, when his location was known. He was not lost in some inaccessible wilderness. He was there, on the side of the road, under station lights and dawn skies, suspended in a space between being found and being gone. As the night bled into morning, Bryce's behavior grew even harder to understand. Phone records and witness accounts suggested that for long stretches, he remained in or near the same area instead of driving the expected distance south. At one point, he told his mother he was too tired to continue and needed to rest. She encouraged that. It sounded reasonable. A college student driving long hours at night, potentially exhausted, stopping to sleep before getting back on the road, none of this would ordinarily appear ominous. But reasonableness began to dissolve under the pressure of timing. The number of hours no longer matched the geography. The explanations no longer matched the evidence. He was moving just enough to create the appearance of progress, but not enough to get home. Then, in the early morning hours of August 30, his car was discovered overturned near Castaic Lake, north of Los Angeles. It had gone down an embankment off Lake Hughes Road, an area where the terrain opens into dry hills, scrub brush, and dusty inclines that by day can look merely empty, but by night become a labyrinth of shadows and silence. The vehicle, a Toyota Highlander, had sustained significant damage. The rear window had been shattered outward, the airbags had deployed. Blood was found inside, though later reports indicated it was only a small amount, not obviously consistent with catastrophic injury. Bryce himself was nowhere to be found. The image of that vehicle at the crash site has become central to the mystery because it contains two conflicting stories. One suggests a violent accident, sudden and disorienting, the kind of event that can leave a person injured, confused, and desperate to seek help on foot. The other suggests a deliberate rupture, a final severing from the visible world. Investigators would later note that Bryce's wallet, phone, and laptop were found inside or near the car. Those details matter because they imply something unusual about his departure. People fleeing an accident, especially at night, often take whatever is most immediately attached to them: a phone, keys, wallet, some basic anchor to identity and survival. Leaving those items behind could suggest disorientation. It could also suggest intention. In mysteries like this, the same fact can point in opposite directions. Tracking dogs reportedly followed Bryce's scent away from the crash scene to a nearby truck stop where the trail ended. That ending has generated years of speculation. It suggests he may have made it out of the wreck, left the area on foot, and reached a point where he either entered another vehicle, lost the scent in heavy traffic, or otherwise disappeared into a place where the trail could no longer be meaningfully followed. For some, this implies that Bryce survived the crash and intentionally left. For others, it merely widens the circle of uncertainty. A truck stop is both public and anonymous, the perfect setting for accidental invisibility. It is a place where strangers pass within feet of one another and remember nothing. There were additional details that made the scene even stranger. Investigators found duffel bags and personal effects. His car had apparently struck a flare marker and gone down the embankment, but questions remained about the speed of impact, the mechanics of the crash, and what Bryce did in the moments afterward.
Some reports indicated that the vehicle may have been intentionally driven off the road after an earlier stop nearby, though the certainty of that interpretation has remained elusive. The ambiguity here is crucial. If the crash was accidental, then the story becomes one of survival, confusion, and a vulnerable young man wandering into darkness. If it was intentional, then the crash may represent some deeper psychological fracture, but even then, it does not explain what happened next. The lake did not yield him, the surrounding land did not clearly hold him. He seemed to pass through a violent event and continue beyond it, leaving only the wreckage as proof that he had been there at all. When authorities and family members began to reconstruct Bryce's final known movements, what emerged was not a clean timeline, but a pattern of pauses, reversals, and emotional uncertainty. He had spoken to his mother, he had accepted roadside assistance, he had remained in one location for an implausibly long time. He had then continued south, eventually nearing home, only to stop again in the Castaic area. It is tempting to imagine that by the time he reached that region, he was on the verge of safety, that the hardest part of whatever he was going through was nearly over. But distance alone does not measure proximity to help. A person can be close to home and very far from rescue. Theories have multiplied over the years, as they inevitably do when evidence is thin and absence becomes a canvas. One possibility is that Bryce experienced a mental health crisis, compounded by sleep deprivation, substance use, or emotional turmoil, and that after the crash, he walked away in a confused state, becoming lost or succumbing to the environment. Southern California terrain can be deceptive. Areas around Castaic Lake are rugged in places, cut by ravines, brush, water, heat, and pockets of isolation. Search efforts can miss what is close by, particularly if a person is mobile, concealed, or traveling unpredictably. Yet this explanation, for all its plausibility, leaves unresolved why no definitive trace of him has ever been found, despite searches and years of attention. Another possibility is that Bryce chose to disappear, using the crash as either a spontaneous opportunity or a deliberate break from his former life. This theory draws strength from the emotional disturbances reported before he vanished, from the possessions left behind, and from the scent trail leading towards a truck stop. It also draws strength from a certain unsettling logic. If a person wants to sever connections completely, there may be no more effective beginning than an accident in the dark that convinces the world to search in the wrong direction. But this interpretation demands a level of planning and endurance that may or may not fit the known facts. Bryce had no verified access to money beyond what was left behind. He was young, possibly exhausted, possibly impaired, and stepping into disappearance is far more difficult in reality than it appears in theory. To vanish successfully is not simply to leave, it is to continue leaving every day without mistake. There is also the darker possibility that Bryce encountered someone after the crash or near the truck stop, someone who recognized vulnerability in a lone young man moving through the early morning hours without clear purpose. Crimes of opportunity thrive in precisely such conditions, in those blank spaces where routine surveillance give way to fatigue, indifference, and the anonymity of transit. Yet there is no confirmed evidence of foul play in the conventional sense. No witnessed abduction, no forensic sign that another person was in the car at the moment of the crash, no public breakthrough pointing to a suspect. It remains possible, but possibility is not resolution. What makes the Bryce Laspisa case so enduringly haunting is not just the disappearance itself, but the emotional architecture surrounding it. This was not a person who simply slipped silently from public view. He was in contact, he was expected, concern had already formed around him before he vanished. There were warnings without clarity, proximity without intervention, visibility without comprehension. His parents have spoken repeatedly over the years, describing the agony of those final conversations, the unbearable knowledge that they knew something was wrong and still could not reach him in time. In many missing persons cases, families are left to ask when everything changed. Here, the more painful question may be whether everything had already changed and nobody yet understood how far.
The landscape of the case has shifted with time, but not enough to quiet it. Age-progressed images have been circulated, sightings have been reported and investigated. Online communities have dissected the timeline with relentless attention, examining maps, call logs, witness statements, and behavioral clues in search of the one detail that might rearrange the narrative into something solvable. But the deeper one looks, the more the case resists certainty. Bryce Laspisa remains suspended between explanations: a troubled young man who lost his way, a deliberate runaway, a victim of circumstance, a victim of another person, or something less easily named, a disappearance born from the exact convergence of youth, distress, motion, and night. And perhaps that is why the story lingers so powerfully, because it unfolds not in some distant era or mythic place, but on recognizable roads, in ordinary vehicles, between phone calls and gas stations, within the banal geography of modern life. There is no locked room puzzle here, no theatrical villain, no single dramatic event that explains the silence that followed. There is only a young man driving home, a family waiting, a series of choices or breakdowns we can partially observe but never fully enter, and then an absence so complete that it transforms the route itself into part of the mystery. Somewhere between Rockland and Laguna Niguel, between the first call and the overturned car, between the truck stop and the empty morning, Bryce Laspisa crossed out of the known world. The unsettling truth is that he may have done so in full view of it. Even now, if you trace that drive on a map, it appears simple enough: a line running south through California, a route any navigation system can explain in seconds. But maps are often honest only about distance. They do not show the hidden terrain inside a person's mind. They do not mark the moment exhaustion becomes detachment, when fear becomes numbness, or when home, however close, begins to feel impossibly far away. And in the Bryce Laspisa case, that unseen terrain may be the most important landscape of all, because somewhere within it lies the answer to what happened after the crash, after the calls, after the last point at which anyone could still say with certainty where he was. What happened in those final hours has never been fully recovered. What remains are traces, a damaged vehicle, a stalled journey, a trail that ends where other roads begin, and the quiet, persistent weight of a question that has outlived the night in which it was born.